Hello and welcome to the Low Tox Life podcast.
New experiences create new memories, which then create new predictions for your brain to think, oh, the next time I interact with them, I'm going to respond in this way. Because our brains are predictive machines. They're always just operating on like what happened in the past in that particular context. What do I expect is going to happen in the future? I'm going to get my body to be ready for that. And I'm going to react that way. So how do we change that? We have to change experience, which changes memory, which changes prediction. So you have to be consciously, repetitiously trying to change that.
Hey, and welcome to the show, long-time listeners, new listeners. When I saw that there was this incredible book called Wired for Peace and that a Ph.D. social-organisational psychologist, Jeremy Pollack, had written it, I wondered whether it was true. I know everyone wants to feel a greater sense of peace and less of a sense that we are entering into conflicts. Jeremy talks us through the differences between conditioning and wiring, and we really unpack some of the aspects of neuroscience that lead us and different people in different ways into heightened senses of precaution, vigilance, defense, and what we can do about that in our own lives, because of course that is something we can all control for today and start to work on. So it's a really powerful chat. We are a cooperative species as Jeremy starts this conversation off. So you will hear from our podcast partners and then we'll head straight in. Something our OG human bodies have definitely not evolved to deal with and filter is all of the toxins that you find in modern drinking water. The bacteria, fungi, viruses have always existed in water as a possible danger, but now we also have to deal with modern man-made chemicals, chlorine that's added in, fluoride that's added in, plastics, nanoplastics, microplastics, PFAS, forever chemicals. That's a lot. So just like those dehumidifiers and air purifiers, my trio of things that we need in the modern life, waterscoaustralia.com.au are brilliant. Their smallest, most basic water filter still has 7 stages of water filtration and a remineralization step for your trace minerals. So that's pretty powerful, but the biggest one we have at the Bio 1000 benchtop water filter has 15 stages of filtration. And so everything you choose in the range is a great idea. And then it's up to you what you have the budget for, what you have the space for. If you choose the subscription model, which auto subscribes you to discounted refills ongoing, and you can cancel that anytime, I highly recommend the brand. 40 years of Korean water technology research, infiltration behind it, always improving every day, every year. waterscoaustralia.com.au. There are a lot of things that we can think we need when it comes to reducing our environmental toxin exposures and improving the health of our homes. 2 things that I genuinely believe move the needle massively are dehumidifiers and air purifiers. Just like us needing walking and sunshine and water, our homes need care as well. And dehumidification, especially once you know through getting a climate gauge, and that's the easiest thing. That's like a $20 spend to pop one in a couple of different areas of your home. If you see that those are over 60% humidity regularly, this is why we end up with those moldy clothes and bags and shoes in the back of a cupboard in the shady bedroom of the house. So if you haven't invested in a dehumidifier, please go check out ozclimate.com.au. If you're an Aussie, if you're overseas, there will no doubt be a great dehumidifier brand in your part of the world. But I do know you can get OzClimate in Australia and New Zealand, and you have 10% off with the code LOWTOXLIFE, and that often works on top of sale prices. And if you have any questions on the Instagram feed at LowToxLife, if you scroll down a little bit on the main feed, you'll see a huge stack of tiles that have a white background with the parts 1 through 10. And that is a whole suite of dehumidifying how-tos, why-tos, when-tos, what-tos to help you feel more literate, know what you should get and when you should use it. Hello, Jeremy. How are you?
Good, Alex. How are you?
I am great, and I am thrilled to have you on the show. I know you work with a lot of organisations around peace and conflict, but you have a personal passion for the broader conversation around peace. And I thought we could start with a question from my 16-year-old, because he wants to know, if we're wired for peace, why does everyone seem to hate each other so much right now?
Yeah. Well, I like the way he phrased it. The key word is seem, right? Mm-hmm. Why does it seem that way? And there's a lot of different reasons why it might seem that way. But I'll first of all, I think maybe we can frame the answer before we answer. Most people, when they're walking around the world, are most of the time cooperating with each other. Cooperation from the sort of perspective of just an animal species. First of all, human beings are what's called ultrasocial. So we're the only real mammal. I mean, there's some debate around whether sort of mole rats are ultrasocial, but it's controversial, and essentially we are the only social animal that's called ultrasocial, and that means that we have a very complex, we have the ability to cooperate with a very large number of people in a very complex way. The only other species that do that are like ants and certain bees. And they all kind of think of themselves as one organism, where we don't. We think of ourselves really as individuals at least in certain cultures. But we can cooperate with all kinds of people, large groups of people. We can walk down the street and I can pass a stranger, not know them, not have any idea who they are, and be totally cooperative and peaceful by just nodding or by doing nothing and just walking past them. Now, most animals can't do that. Most animals don't do that. We have wiring for cooperation. We also have wiring that allows us to go into defense mode. This is our survival mechanism. So we can think of ourselves really as we're sort of wired for survival. And what does that mean? If you put someone who's wired for survival in a very cooperative place, they're going to be very cooperative. If you put them in a very chaotic place, they're going to probably go into defense a lot. So you could think of it both ways. Like we're capable of doing all kinds of things. But if you look at the biology of what neurobiologically, neurochemically, what's happening in our brains and bodies when we're cooperating, when we're collaborating, we are releasing things like oxytocin. We're experiencing neurochemicals like sometimes serotonin or even dopamine if we have desire. We're releasing things that make us feel good. When we relax and connect with each other and cooperate, and we're at peace, we literally feel good internally and hopefully psychologically, at least those of us who are not psychopaths, which is most of the population. If you are in conflict, in tension with other people or with groups or whatever, typically you're going to have stress hormones released, cortisol, maybe some adrenaline, noradrenaline. These are the things that kind of make us feel more tense, more rigid, not so relaxed. It's not very comfortable. If you look at what happens to someone under chronic stress, you realize that hormonal cascade was never meant to be permanent or long lasting. That's a very quick hit of survival mechanism, and we're supposed to go back to baseline, back to homeostasis. So if you just follow the biology, you could say
flexible nervous systems that can rise to the challenge when there is one. Yeah. It's not often, once or twice a day, boom, 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 100%, and then you're back to hanging out.
Exactly. We were never meant to be in enraged hatred, in conflict constantly. And if you look at the neurobiology, like the way we've evolved, it tells a story. And so my argument from a biological perspective would be, if we are our natural selves, our authentic selves, our relaxed state, our homeostatic state points to that natural self. And what leads us there? Peace and cooperation and collaboration.
Yeah.
The unnatural self is the self in defense. It's what we're supposed to be momentarily and then return to baseline. Because if you're there too long, you get into chronic stress and it's not good for anything, mind, body, etc. So I think if you just look at the biology, it kind of points you in the direction of like, that's our authentic self. That's our true nature. We're supposed to be cooperative and we have abilities to get into defense mode. But we're not supposed to be there all the time. Now, why are we there all the time? Well, there's all kinds of interesting reasons for that. I will say, though, that the word seem, which your son said, part of our evolved psychological architecture is to pay attention to narrative, is to pay attention to drama, reputation, etc. Because if we do this, we can figure out like who in the group is to be trusted and who not. So like that's how we just evolved. And so we like to know about drama and stuff like that. So we're drawn to it.
Can I ask there? So is that, coming back to your word wired, is that what we're also wired for, to like detect like any kind of variances that might cause trouble?
Yeah, that's part of our wiring too. I mean, I think if you look at the baseline of like, we're wired for survival. What does survival require? It definitely requires cooperation. We can't exist outside groups. We have to exist in groups. I mean, at least through evolutionary time. We're also wired to defend ourselves too. We also have a lot of social wiring, and part of that social wiring is paying attention to social stories, social narratives, social dramas. Because if we know what's going on in our society, in our community, and think about this from like just an evolutionary perspective, like we grew up, our ancestors were in groups of 50 people originally, and then eventually 150, and then hundreds. So we have this architecture to like, I'm drawn to sort of drama and conflict and stuff like that. Now, if our brains are drawn to that, that means that now if we're just with each other in a group, it's worth paying attention to that stuff, because now we know that person is kind of volatile and that person's like really nice, but you can kind of walk, like we know all these things socially. It's really important for us to know that. However, now we're fed news and social media and stuff like that, but our brains don't know the difference between that and me being in a group of 50 people. So I'm paying attention to that same stuff. The social media algorithms understand that, so they feed me more of it. And so I don't see things online mostly about like cooperation and connection and collaboration. There's definitely stuff like that. If you watch more of it, the algorithm will feed you that. But we're so drawn to drama and conflict that the algorithm's going to feed that. So the number of cooperative interactions every day between human beings is in the trillions. The number of conflicting is probably in the millions. It's a lot, but it's not close to as many as cooperative, I bet.
And so is it because of the sheer access, communication-wise, media-wise, to seeing that, coupled with the fact that we're wired to clock dangers and variances and conflicts, then creating this false sense that my world is dangerous when the world over there is dangerous? But
100%.
This is the part where I get, like, my mind kind of starts to explode, right? Because ancestors of people like you and me decided that they should just go take over countries. Like, that creates globalization. Then you have this economic hitman kind of situation where imperialism continues, but it's light and it looks like business, where infrastructure projects happen and then they're in debt to the other country for like generations. And that creates conflict because there's people clever enough to realize, hey, we got had with that deal and now we're poor forever. And we have this like deep rooted connection now globally for a number of reasons that a lot of us in the present day didn't or may not have ever chosen. But it is kind of part of why caring about the world globally and not just worrying about our own backyard is the reality for the modern human.
Okay. Good framework. I love this. So like, what would be,
it, right?
Well, so this is often things like, well, I can't bury my head in the sand and like not watch the news and media and stuff like that. Okay.
And I can't care for everything all the time out there and not run my own life.
And by the way, I would say that for those of us who are not living in war zones, if you did stop watching news and social media, it would not seem like people are fighting and conflict all the time. Mm-hmm. It would not seem that way. And I've done it myself and it doesn't seem that way. However, the thought that like, well, I don't want to bury my head in the sand because I have like sort of a moral or a social responsibility to be aware of things and pay attention and stuff like that. And so I think absolutely everybody has to make a choice about what they want to pay attention to and what sort of state it puts their brains and their nervous systems and their psychology in. And my question would be, if we're looking at just like, so my goal is always like, how do we get people to peace? How do we get certainly let's get the world to peace, but that's a tough thing, right? So, but how do we get our people, starting with your family, then your community, et cetera? What is the best version of you that's most likely to bring more peace into the world? Is it an at-peace regulated nervous system, or is it a dysregulated nervous system? That's number one. Which one's more likely to bring more peace into your family, which then regulates them, and they bring more peace into their circles, etc. So going out, so like more practically, because on one level you could say, well, I need to pay attention to things, and I would push back just a little bit and say, A, what state does that put your nervous system in? Do you feel upset, dysregulated, etc.? How then does that version of you show up in your life with other people? And are you creating more peace as a result of that nervous system state? A. And B, what are you doing with the information? You paying attention to it and quote unquote caring isn't doing a whole heck of a lot other than dysregulating you. But if you're doing it because you have some sort of role and you're actually using it in a strategic, action-oriented way to create more peace in the world, however that method is, whether that's a peace-building method or an advocacy method or something like that, then great. Then that's what you need to do for that particular role. But don't just pay attention because my argument would be, don't pay attention just because if you don't, you feel guilty. Because then you're just in this rock and a hard place. I'm either dysregulated and stressed because I witness it, or I feel guilty because I'm not paying attention to it. Or I'm ashamed
and guilty. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So figure out what is the best path to peace. If the best path, for me, I can't watch. My wife can watch and listen to the news all day long. Doesn't dysregulate her. And I have a deal with her where I basically said, I can't watch that stuff because it really dysregulates me. It makes me very nervous. It makes me feel like I'm always paranoid. I'm going to stop. And I want you to tell me if there's anything I should know that's going to affect us, or anything that I'm doing, or then anything I should know just about the world. Like, you really think I should know it. And it's not just to dysregulate. And that's my deal with her. Luckily, I have that person. But I just think, how do I bring more peace into the world? I have to show up regulated for my family, for my employees, for my coworkers, for the clients that I'm working with, et cetera. I have to show up regulated to help them build peace. The only way to do that is to take a step back from paying attention to all this stuff that's dysregulating me.
Mm-hmm. And so, just so we kind of sum that up, caring is good. Pick something you're going to follow through with.
Yeah.
And dial down the other things.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I think. I mean, yeah.
What about if what you care about causes harm to someone else? Like let's just say right now there are several cultures and countries reducing the rights of women and girls, for example, on a number of levels, whether it's education, healthcare, all the different things. Research erosion, where we only literally just got it in the early 90s, and now it's being rolled back again in several countries. So that could be someone picking something they care about because of a belief that actually causes harm to another group of people. How do we care about the things where it's not about getting one up on another group of people, but actually coming back into that collaborative wiring that you're making the case for us having?
Yeah, well, listen, peace, in my experience, peace is very tough. There's not a lot of examples of peace being built in large groups. It has to be built in small ways, small groups. If you care about an issue and you think that, hey, I care about this issue because I think if we get this issue passed, or if we give these folks more rights or something like that, it will build more peace in our world. More people will be at peace. So I care about that. I'm going to do something. I'm going to take some action. I'm going to join a group or whatever that is to take some action towards it. And you notice those actions is what you're asking. If those actions are then somehow there's a compromise essentially that's kind of taking away creating harm for some other group or taking away rights or something like that. Is that what you're?
Yeah. Would you in that scenario argue that the person who's going for something they believe in and thinks that that's going to create more peace is actually troubled somewhere deep because they haven't even recognized that it's not a peaceful solution?
Yeah, well, this brings up another whole area of what I call change management.
Philosophy at uni as a part of my subject, so
no, I think
I like
it's
getting messy.
Yeah. Me too. I think it's important to, this is a part of, all peace processes are change processes, essentially. So if we look at what an effective change management program should be.
Yeah.
Hey, we want to change this group or this society or this community, whatever it is, we want to make a change. I think we have to ask some very important questions. And that's one of those questions. Number one is like, what is our vision for all people affected by the change? What will happen? Like, what do we think could happen? A. B. Why do we think this change is important? How is it going to help certain people? And what are the sort of downstream effects that might hurt certain people, if there are any? Why do we think the particular method that we're taking to make this change is the right method? What evidence do we have to support that theory? And so like there's so many people, I see this in organizations, there's so many organizations that they want to create change, but they have no understanding of why or how. So they say like, we got to make this change, but well, why are you going to make that change? Did you survey people? Did you figure out the majority of people actually want this? Was there an actual problem you're trying to solve? No, it's just like the senior leadership kind of has this idea that we should do it, right? And this is like
across that all the time.
Yeah, organizations and also in communities. Like we just think this is a good idea. Well, have you actually asked people if it's a good idea? And by the way, how do you think you should go about this change? Like, oh, the method of change is to train a bunch of people? Like, why do you think that's the right way to do this? Like, to make this change? What evidence do you have to support the idea that this sort of particular training will actually create this sort of change, which will fix the problem you're trying to fix, because change is about fixing problems. And there's a lot of sort of like pushing for change that people are not really clear on how we're doing it, why we're doing it that way, why we're doing it in the first place, what problems is it solving, and who is it affecting, and in what kinds of ways on all sides. There's not a lot of thought around, and I think it's important to think through that in all change processes, including peace processes.
And so that leads me to our current media climate, because we're not thinking things through very often. We're often taking headline as news, as fact, as full story, or a 30-second reel, or even a 3-minute reel. What are some of the tools we need to be better at asking ourselves the questions before we take on that's the right way as even a possibility, let alone following through or cementing that as a belief?
I think I'm gonna spitball here, because what I think I'm gonna go off of an anecdotal, just personal experience of news interaction.
Yeah, please do.
And then just having conversations with other people that I know that, around news and stuff. I think that we're so used to now quick information, and our brains want to move so fast, our focus and attention wants to move so fast, that we're not really willing to dig into to issues too deeply. And if we do, and we have a particular belief that we're trying to support by looking into those, we are experiencing a lot of confirmation bias. So we're not willing to look at any information or articles or research or anything that contradicts our currently held beliefs. And so we're only looking at particular news media, and a lot of times just the headlines. And for me, what I realize, which is one of the reasons I stopped watching the news so much, is like, I think human beings have a natural inclination to wanting to understand truth. And then the question is, well, what's truth? What's real? And how do I get to truth? And is it important for me to understand truth happening in somewhere else in the world? And how do I know that it is the truth? Because if I'm looking through the lens of a person or a group or a company, news, media, etc., that has a particular angle as well and cuts things a certain way, I'm getting a filtered view of reality too. Right. And so in addition to that, I also have my own brain to contend with, which is going through confirmation bias and only paying attention to elements that are kind of confirming my own beliefs. So it's like, how do I get to some level of truth? I've had a couple of experiences. One where I read a headline, and the headline was like, I can't remember what it was, but it was like just super clear about like, and it got me like kind of angry. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And I kind of read through it, and I read into the article. And the author of the article, the journalist, what they described was completely different than what the headline said. Now, this is the same
They're trying
article.
to get people to click. It's literally part of their remit now.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? How could you possibly have this headline now? And I remember another time when I was watching a news station, and it was like, it's a global news. I used to watch it all the time. And they were commenting on a certain, they showed a clip. I think it was like a 10-second clip of a particular politician. And then from that 10-second clip, they had like a 30-minute long panel discussing all the like things that he meant by that and stuff like that. And it was like just demeaning that like damning the person, right? And I thought, man, how could he say that? I can't believe it. And I was like, yeah, give it to him. These angry, people that. And then I actually went back and I watched the full clip in context, maybe 15 minutes long, and it was so obvious that what he said had nothing to, and this is a politician I did not like. It had nothing to do at all with how they were framing it. And I was like, I felt betrayed, because I was like, these people who I like always watch completely lied to me. And that was it. I stopped watching that. Like, I was like, I don't know what reality is anymore if I can't trust certain people. I just don't know. I'm just not going to trust them, So it's very hard to figure out what truth is now.
It is. And coming back to what you were saying earlier about choosing things that you're actually going to follow through with if you're going to learn about them or watch things about those topics or people, that took you a while to go through and assess properly what was going on in that news story. But I'd hazard a guess that it's also something you weren't prepared to take action on. You were just curious that day and you thought, that looks weird. I'm going to check that out. And I'm going to...
Exactly.
You still weren't going to... So in the end, none of it is actually going to move us closer to peace in a bigger way. It was more just an illustration for you that half the time the stuff that's making people angry online isn't even true.
Well, and it's like my wife will like watch something and she'll be like, this city just elected these officials and this is what those officials believe. Can you believe that? And like that kind of thing. And I'm just like, how does that information, like, what are we going to do with that information? How does that, or we're not in that city. We can't vote for those people. All it's doing is making us angry. Why do I need the information? Like, I can't, there's nothing I can do about it. And it's not even like going to affect us really, because it's just in a particular city that's far from this city. So like, I understand you care about it, and she likes it. Me, it just gets me dysregulated unless like I don't need to know that information. I can't do anything with it.
And I guess maybe it'd be interesting to speak to your wife about this actually, because maybe for her it's highlighted that, oh my gosh, I never even thought of school board elections and I didn't even know we got to, but because she saw something on another city in another state in a lower down kind of level of city government or state government that than many people ever even vote for. We have the same issue here in Australia. Then she's going to become more active and use that information to ensure she doesn't let the same thing happen close to her.
That's the only thing I can think. Yeah, that sort of thing, like her having that knowledge, puts her sort of on like a watch, like a monitoring. Let's make sure that those types of people are not getting elected in our city, because that kind of thing.
It's her role in the tribe, and you've got a different one.
Yeah, that could be the reason. I mean, she didn't frame it like that. It was more like, we're not going to that city, like okay, we're not going there.
Yeah. So when one writes a book called Wired for Peace, Jeremy, I am curious, on the road to researching something like this, and I've written 2 books myself, and you're organizing all the information in a way that you feel the story needs to be told for people to understand and for people to find it useful, especially in nonfiction, right? Was there a particular aspect that you thought you were clear on heading in that actually when you started unpacking it, you were like, that's interesting. I have a Ph.D. in this stuff, and that still kind of threw me off. Was there anything that you found in researching the book that was a bit of a shock or?
That's a really good question. A bit of a shock. There were things that were very enlightening. I mean, part of the reason I was interested in this topic was because there's just not been a lot of, there hasn't been a lot of writing and research around the neuroscience behind conflict resolution processes. There's been one particular area, which is what my chapter 1 is on, and that's the longest chapter because there's been so much written on it, really about like escalated states, emotionally charged states, and what happens to the brain, and how like sort of the prefrontal cortex starts to deactivate, and all that stuff. So that there's a lot on that, but then there's all kinds of other things happening in conflict resolution that obviously is driven by our brain science, brain. So, but there's a lot of really interesting information that I didn't know before for sure when I was researching it.
I always think with nonfiction, like you set out because you have a conviction that this thing needs to be done. And I remember when I did the food systems chapter of my food book, and I had this idea of what regenerative agriculture was and these incredible heroes over the last century trying to get us on a better track. And actually, we're just rediscovering very old, incredibly intelligent indigenous forms of farming. And I was like, oh, okay, well, who are those heroes? And let me make sure I'm telling those stories as well.
Cool.
And so for me, that's my example of what that was for my book.
Yeah, I don't know that there was anything like that I discovered that was like, oh, and I changed direction because of it. But what did surprise me was how many functions dopamine has. And because dopamine is often talked about as this sort of like the desire drug, where it's like you get some dopamine and you want something, and it's not when you get it, it's when you want it, and the dopamine drives that motivation. It's like a motivational sort of hormone. But there's all kinds of other interesting things that it does where like it's required. One of the things is dopamine is required for learning, and I didn't know that, like for conditioning. And another part of the conditioning, which was really interesting that I didn't know, which was like, when we learn, when we get conditioned, especially with very impactful emotional events, our sympathetic nervous system has to be aroused. We actually learn in sympathetic arousal, not in relaxed states, but in super engaged, even fearful states. That's where our brain learns and rewires. And that's why they could think of like fear-based and pain-based learning as often one trial learning. Something really traumatic happens, your brain will rewire from that one event. And part of the reason is that sympathetic system is really high. And then how it kind of, once the sort of like the neuroplasticity starts to take place, it gets solidified then during sympathetic arousal, then during rest, and so sleep becomes very important too. But there's a dopaminergic aspect to all of this too, which is like dopamine has to be at certain levels for learning to take place. It also is really important for creativity, which I didn't really know, and not because of like motivational factors. It's just literally dopamine. The dopamine system feeds the salience network, which is the balancing mechanism between what's called the default mode network, which is our really imaginative states, and the executive control network, which is the sort of logical states. That those two have to be in balance to be creative, because it's not just pure imagination; it has to actually be practical and framed around something that's kind of realistic. So these two states have to be in balance. The salience network is the network of circuits that balance it, and dopamine levels have to be at a certain balance level for that to even work. So it was interesting to me to feel like this dopamine is like a really important hormone like neurochemical / hormone for all these aspects.
And rest means not just sleep for the reorganization and compartmentalization of everything that we've learned, but also rest while awake, and that boredom that then kicks off the arousal that then kicks off more learning. And we're missing that a lot in the modern, dare I say, landscape.
Absolutely.
Of phones.
Well, one of those things that's really important for creativity is kind of boredom. I mean, not boredom where you're hypo-aroused, like where you're just like really like almost like depressed, but like boredom where you're not paying attention to something. You're not consuming information. You're just letting your mind kind of wander without stimulants. And then
soft fascination, I think an LA-based professor called it, and I love that term because it is just like the gazing out and taking things in, but nothing in particular, and drifting. Very powerful stuff. So you obviously work with a lot of organizations, Jeremy. Can you share a story of completely dysregulated people in a certain scenario where you came in and rewired essentially the situation and helped them become regulated to actually deal with things peacefully? Because corporate tension,
Yeah.
especially in this world of profit at all costs, otherwise people get fired and everyone gets laid off, and I mean it's an awful system. I'm not saying we try and solve that part of it in this conversation, but helping people through some of the heightened moments.
Well, one of the important things when you're doing peace work around escalated situations, meaning emotionally charged, essentially, and you can recognize the signs because typically, like in a workplace, most of the time when people are dysregulated, they're going to withdraw and shut down. Sometimes they go into sort of the opposite end, which is
Blow
like
up. Yeah.
blow up, et cetera. And those are usually like people that feel they're entitled to do that, like especially like leadership and stuff. But a lot of times, if you're an employee at a company and you're dysregulated and you feel stressed out, you're in conflict, et cetera, a lot of times you're going to be shut down. You kind of withdraw and not speak and not even want to engage in a process. So and when we get called in to help with conflicts, it's always typically some sort of dysregulated conflict, like an escalated. So the most important thing, first of all, in a peace process is to help everybody feel really comfortable with you as a peace builder, or with you as a mediator or a coach or whomever, whatever role you're taking. And building rapport, doing private sessions, learning about them, making sure they know you care about them, that you're here for not the company, but to help them and get their needs met as well. So really from a peace building lens, whether you're a peace professional mediator or you're an HR or whomever, or your leader, et cetera, if you're going to attempt a peace process, you have to make sure that everybody involved knows that you're on their side, that you care about them, that your agenda is not to just get what's best for the company, but also what's best for them. Otherwise, don't attempt a peace process. Do something else, like have another program or something.
Yeah.
But so people have to really believe that. So a lot of times when we bring people together in a dialogue, we're already hopefully to that point where we've helped people regulate, and they have a sort of anchor point, which is me or the mediator who they built rapport with, they trust, they feel safe with, so that they don't necessarily become dysregulated in that meeting. And if they start to shut down or they get a little intense, we have some rapport. We can help them through that, or even if we just take a pause and have a little break and stuff like that. So for me, the anecdote prior to a dialogue, especially the anecdote to helping someone feel regulated, is care and connection, for them to feel that I actually care. And sometimes it takes a while for someone to feel like I actually care about them. For me to even if I do, for them to register, for them to believe it, for them to believe like I'm not here just because the company wants me here and I only care about the company's agenda. Like, no, that's not how I work. I actually really care about getting your needs met.
Do you think leaders always want their company to work well, but you've just shared that leaders tend to be the ones who feel that they deserve to be the ones to blow up if anyone's going to blow up?
Yeah.
How do you help a leader rewire for peace and realize that that's actually the gold of leadership, not the power and domination cell that leadership is?
Well, I think each person's different. Each person has different things that are motivating them, and each person has different things that condition them to respond and behave in the way they did. I think always any change process, including a peace process, starts with motivation. Are you actually motivated to see this thing through? Because creating change and creating peace is going to be an effort. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some energy, focus. Might be a little uncomfortable at times. How motivated are you to get to a better place with this person or with this team or in this company? Like talk me through that. Let's talk about that. So if they're motivated enough, then we can start to use some skills. So different types of skills. Self-regulation skills are important. Communication skills are important. Combining those two are really important. There's different types of techniques and frameworks for all that stuff, depending on what we're working on. I mean, one of the most important factors to make sure of is that someone who is in a leadership position a lot of times also feels alone, and they feel like, hey, I'm maybe I'm not getting enough appreciation and stuff. Now, I don't necessarily think. I think the onus is on a leader to give appreciation and not require it. But unfortunately, a lot of times leaders feel alone and they feel isolated and they don't feel like no one's caring about me, no one's paying attention to me. So sometimes that, as a coach or a mediator or a peace builder, we have to be that for them and let them know someone does care about you and your needs too.
It's
they
lonely
are
at the top, as they say. Yeah.
And so helping them again, co-regulate. I can be a source of regulation and help them feel cared about and connected so that they can regulate with me. They can start to regulate. They can feel what it's like to be regulated. And then we can go into difficult conversations. And then I can push them a little bit and give them a little bit of the challenge in a private, safe way so that they can practice feeling regulated around these difficult conversations. Hey, let's role play this out. Let's use the technique we just went over. Let's use the self-regulation we just practiced. Let's pretend I'm that individual, and let's talk this out. Let's see what happens here, and let's start, and then we can kind of workshop it a little bit. So there's lots of different ways to do this, but I think practice using techniques and really feeling cared for and co-regulating with someone who cares about you.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I have a couple of things I want to ask here. So it's lonely at the top was just something that came from what you were talking about there, where they often don't feel seen or cared for.
Yeah.
And does that therefore mean that we could say hierarchy in and of itself breeds this, I'm now lonely, I don't feel cared for, and I'm now having to go into a power over instead of a power with dynamic? And maybe we need to rethink the way we lay things out, because it seems like it just always leads to that. And then there's too much power at the top. Look at the concentration of wealth at the moment. People go crazy when they're that isolated and that different to everybody else.
Yeah, if you feel very different and isolated, I think it's a problem. I mean, I think one of the problems is the way that the hierarchies are thought about or structured. Because there's two elements to a hierarchy. Let me think of the right words. There is an organizational hierarchy, and I'll be honest, the organizations that don't have a clear hierarchy do not operate as well as the ones who do have one. I think that's important. There has to be a chain of command. There has to be people who people can look to for leadership, for vision, et cetera, and et cetera. Okay, so there's an organizational hierarchy, which is important, I think. However, that often gets tied with a relational hierarchy or maybe a humanistic hierarchy. And that's the thing that I think we can change or dampen, that I don't think is necessary. People at the top often feel like they can't be. Now, I do think you have to be very careful about what you're transparent. You can't be transparent about everything, especially if you're nervous and anxious about things. You're anxious and nervous.
You carry that, and you don't make your team carry that. Yeah.
But there's a level of transparency, a level of connection, a level of care, a level of trust and autonomy giving. That's all part of relationships, all kinds of relationships. And I think if you are, regardless of your role, if you're a CEO or a mid-level man or whatever, if you think of yourself as equal to everyone else, to the person in the mailroom, we're all equal. We're human beings. I'm going to treat you just as importantly as I treat everybody else. There's no relational hierarchy. We're all humans here. But there's an organizational structure we maintain in order to be functional. And if we really focus on that, take the ego out of it. Just put your ego aside, forget your ego, and just be human to human with everyone that works with you rather than for you. I think that's the part that really makes a difference while keeping in place an organizational structure.
I love those delineations. So hierarchy, good in terms of organizing structure, flow of information, mentorship, seniority, experience level, yada, yada, ability to take on more and more pressure. But relational hierarchy, bad. And I feel like we can then extrapolate that in communities, in the parents committee at school. And you're not better than me because you're head of the parents. What do you guys call it? The PTA? We call it the P and F. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you think we could be doing to help the community better, like
Yeah,
relate like humans, but have
absolutely.
structure that lets the humans get stuff done.
Well, yeah, think about what people get angry about with leadership. All kinds of
Mm,
leadership,
mm,
politicians, people on PTA boards, etc. It's not the fact that we have a board or have a political body or have people in different positions. We need those. People like the fact that we have those most of the time. What we don't like is those people have different rights than us. They have more rights than us. They don't get in trouble like we get in trouble if they do something wrong. It's like a different playing field for them because they're, in a higher position. All that stuff is the stuff that really makes people angry, right? The lack of fairness. And that's just all people thinking that they're better or different or ego or like, I don't have to play by the rules because I'm in a particular position. Like that stuff is bullshit. That stuff we got to get rid of because that's what creates tons of conflict.
yeah, definitely got a few issues in our world with that kind of stuff at the
Yeah.
moment. And so conditioned to not be peaceful is something that you write about, and so that's different to wiring. Can we, just as we close out, maybe look at some of the things we could see or start to notice if they might be blind spots that have conditioned us to feel that we need to arc up or blow up or
Mm.
react instead of rehumanize?
Yeah. Well, so conditioning, if we like look at the kind of classic definition, conditioning is uh, is is a form of motivated learning. It is the behavioral output of the neurobiological function called neuroplasticity. So neuroplastic change creates different types of learning, one of which is conditioning. Some people are definitely, their brains and nervous systems have become more hypervigilant, and so they are more in a defensive state dispositionally. Their wiring tells them, just based on their particular history, etc., that I need to be on guard more of the time. The brain's going, I need to be on guard. So my particular areas that are the guard, sort of what used to be called the limbic system, but like my amygdala and sort of the reactionary areas around there is like heightened hypervigilance. Those folks are going to be perceiving attacks or challenges or conflicts more often typically. And so they're more conditioned to behave in certain ways that are defensive, whether that means they're more conditioned to shut down or more conditioned to blow up or both, depending on the context. It's very hard to get out of that unless you recognize the pattern and you're motivated and you say, you know what, this is not helping me in my life. I need to make some changes. What does that look like? I would suggest taking multiple approaches. I would suggest taking a behavioral approach, which is something like, I'm going to commit to not blowing up the next time A, B, or C, that person interacts with me. I'm going to commit to that. I might not say anything, but I'm not going to blow up. I'm going to make that a term in my life. So let's make a behavioral commitment. The psychology of it, the psychological approach is, let me analyze a little bit what's going on for me. What is the threat that I think is happening? What are my goals? How do I think that this person or their story or their beliefs or their whatever is impeding my goals, my needs? They're creating threats for me. How do I believe all that? And what can I do to unwind that psychologically? And I might have to use affirmations or something like that to sort of start believing something or perceiving something differently. And then also, I'm going to work on self-regulation. I'm going to work on being in front of the stimulus and not having the same sort of response. And what does that mean? I need to expose myself to a stimulus and I need to regulate. Exposure with self-regulation. Breathing, calming my face and my shoulders, noticing tension in my body, taking a long exhale, relaxing my body, trying to get my physiology to calm down and tell my brain I'm not in danger, I'm safe. If that's true, if you're not in physical danger,
Yeah.
then you are safe, okay? And so taking these multiple approaches to I am going to change the way that I interact with the world or with this person, with this group. If you change those things, you create new experiences, and those new experiences create new memories, which then create new predictions for your brain to think, oh, the next time I interact with them, I'm going to respond in this way. Because our brains are predictive machines. They're always just operating on what happened in the past in that particular context. What do I expect is going to happen in the future? I'm going to get my body to be ready for that. and I'm
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
react that way. So how do we change that? We have to change experience, which changes memory, which changes prediction. So you have to be consciously, like repetitiously trying to change that.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we need a 3-day seminar, Jeremy.
Yeah, yeah,
This hour has evaporated. Okay, so I've got one more question. If we want to purposefully, intentionally wire ourselves for more peace in this coming week, what do you think we could turn into a little mini project for us all?
yeah. Okay, well let's take those three elements. Well, so number one, if especially if there's something in particular that you know gets you heated, when that thing shows up, and hey, you might say, well, it doesn't have to show up. I don't have to watch that podcast or that YouTube or whatever. If you want to experiment with it, put it on for 30 seconds and try this. Do self-regulation. Self-regulation means I'm going to make sure my body and my body's relaxed. So I need to breathe. I need to get present to my body, feel my body, notice tension, relax my body. This is a physiological technique for relaxing or upregulating the parasympathetic system. So I need to relax the body. I also need to start unraveling the stories that are happening in my mind, and those stories are around threats. That's why we're getting defensive. So if you can self-regulate and you can notice, what do I feel is concerning about this or threatening? Is the threat right here, right now in front of me, about to attack me, or is it an imagined future about what might happen? If it's imagined future and it's not right in front of you, then you need to remember, I am safe right here, right now. I'm okay right here, right now. And that's all that matters. That's all that's true. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We just know what's happening right here. So just getting yourself into the present, reminding yourself you're safe, and telling your body that you're safe to get it to relax, which also tells your brain you're safe. So these techniques, I think, are really baseline important for creating peace in you. And that's the only way you're going to create peace with other people is if you're at peace. There's no way you're going to create peace with other people if you're dysregulated.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. My first thought, it's probably because it's something I'm dealing with right now as an inner demon, is tennis. I'm very competitive and I'm very not peaceful with myself.
Oh, so that's
Yeah,
okay,
so it's actually we started this conversation with start with you. And I honestly sometimes feel like that sport is a brilliant blueprint for being able to do it more. Actually, I'm more peaceful extally than in a tennis match, to be fair.
Most of us are.
Much every other.
Yeah, most people are way more what I might call graceful and gentle and understanding with other people than they are themselves. I had a therapist, I can't remember who was a therapist or a coach, who told me one, long time ago, and it really changed the way I thought about things, is like, why don't you try being gentle with yourself? Is that so bad? Like, do you need to not, what's, so I would, that's another great one. If you feel like, if someone feels like, you're not at peace with yourself about something, are you treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend or a family member or like a daughter or a son? Like, why not treat yourself that way? Why not treat yourself nice, gentle?
Yeah. And one could maybe argue then it would be easier to then emulate that externally as well.
Of course.
In different situations. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think we're harder on ourselves than others often. And yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really value the fact that you've taken the time to remind us that we're wired for peace, Jeremy, and in the book, stepping through those 7 cases made for exactly that and why. And I definitely urge everybody to read. I'm 3 chapters in myself and I'm really enjoying it. So I really appreciate the work that you've put out and this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us in listening to this week's show. If you're not already subscribed or following the show on whatever platform you listened, please do that now. It helps enormously in terms of getting this show out to more people. Another way you can connect and support the work we do so that we can support you in your low tox life is join us in the Low Tox Club. You'll get access to amazing member masterclasses where we invite some of our best show guests for a live Q&A with members. You also have great shopping discounts from low tox businesses and honestly, the nicest low tox community Facebook group that exists on the internet. I do hope you join us there. It costs just the price of a coffee a month on average. Head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the Explore tab, and Low Tox Club is the first option there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.